Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me, as always, is my friend and colleague in the intersubjective realm, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you, Ken?
Oh, good. And very, very grateful to be here today. We have an absolutely packed episode for you. You're going to love this. We're going to be starting off speaking about qualifications. So if you're a student of counselling psychotherapy, what can you hope to do with those qualifications? And we wanted to look a little bit broader than just maybe going into working in a practice. We're looking at, can you transfer them to work overseas? What other professions can you go into with your counselling qualifications? So we'll be having a look at that. And then we've got a really good one, Rory, with theory from Rory. You're going to be speaking about something that is true.
Yes, I am. I'm going to be speaking about congruence. We're talking a little bit about the theory, but also I'm going to talk about how it applies to practice. And I'm going to be talking about my congruent tummy and how it came to the fore in practice this week. So keep tuned for that.
Oh, you see, that is the greatest of hooks, and nobody's not going to listen to that to hear how congruence relates to your tummy in practice, Rory. And then we're going to kind of have a bit of a debate as we close the podcast today. We're going to be speaking about funding for counselling training. And it's an area, Rory, that you've got a little bit of experience in, and you're going to be sharing some ideas around that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. This has come up, as all our ideas come up from our Facebook page. And if you want to join our community, over 4,000 people now and growing every day, you can find it by just typing in Counselling Tutor into Facebook, and you'll find our little community, which isn't so little anymore. Knock on the door. It's a closed group. We let you in, and you can join all the other students and practitioners, and there's some tutors in there, all in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. Or if you want to visit our website, you can go to www.counsellingtutor.com. Remember, there's two L's in counselling. We spell it the UK British English way, not the American way. And just click on the top right-hand tab on the web page, and you'll go straight to that Facebook page again. A little tap on the door, and you'll be welcomed in by either me or Ken, myself or Ken, and you can join the group and join the party, I guess, Ken.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that we use the Facebook group often to inform the topics of the lectures, and today is no exception. We're topping and tailing today and working around the theory that you'll be bringing with stuff from the Facebook group. And the first one was around qualifications, and can your qualifications be used overseas? So if you maybe qualify in the UK, and I'm just using our country as a basis because that's where we are, can you maybe go to the States and counsel with that qualification? What's your thoughts on that, Rory?
Well, it's interesting. There was a little funny part in the Facebook page I'm going to have to share with the listener. Was somebody phoned up one of the UK awarding bodies. I'm going to save their blushes, but phoned up one of the UK awarding bodies and asked if it's possible for them to use their qualifications they gained in England in Scotland. And the awarding body said, don't know.
Wow.
Now, the last time I looked, I know there's a big debate about Scotland leaving England and as being separate countries and having a separate identity. I'm okay with that. But as far as I know, the laws broadly still apply. And I'm sure that it wouldn't have taken the awarding body very long to work out that actually some of the training centres award in Scotland their qualifications. So I thought it was quite amusing. But yeah, it is an interesting point, Ken. Can you take your qualifications abroad? Well, you talked about, I think, America. America's quite a different setup in terms of counselling and psychotherapy. It's my understanding that to be a registered therapist, you need a master's degree, and then you need to take a qualification to get you into the awarding body, to get you into the ethical body. So you have to take an exam. And, of course, it's regulated over there. Or they say it's regulated. The truth of the matter, it's not regulated. If you want to be part of the ethical body, it's regulated. But anybody can set up as a counsellor and do. There's plenty of people who offer repatriative therapy for gay folks. saying that they can make them not gay.
Wow.
And which, of course, is totally unethical and evidence says doesn't work. But it still goes on in the States and has been for a lot of time. So, yes, the American situation is you need a green card to work in the States anyway.
Yeah.
So you need to get in. And then you would need a master's and go through that. And I think you'd find it's a different kind of situation because they use diagnostic statistical manual, they diagnose. To get paid in America, I believe you've got to give a DSM code. So you've got to sort of, Ken comes to me and says, I need some therapy. I say, well, this is what it is. I diagnose him. Then I send the code to his insurance company. The insurance company then kind of says how much they're going to pay me. So it's a really different ballgame over there.
You just hit on something really interesting, and that you said the word insurance company. Now, here in the UK, we have the NHS, so very few people will have a need to have any kind of medical insurance cover. But certainly in South Africa, it's the same there, that a lot of people will choose to pay an insurance to a company that will cover them when they need any kind of medical treatment, from visit to a doctor to hospitalization, and that would include counseling and psychotherapy. And I guess it would be different kind of rules and regulations revolving how you get paid for that, and because the insurance company at the end of the day has to pay. So the short answer for me about using your qualification overseas is I don't know. I really don't. There are so many countries out there, and I guess they're all going to have their unique ways and setups. But what I might suggest is that if you are interested in practicing in a certain country, find out who the awarding body is not the awarding body, the ethical overseer of counselling and psychotherapy is in that country, and contact them, because I would imagine if you were coming from the States to the UK, you might contact the BACP and they may be able to guide you. And I know that there are ways of kind of using qualifications that you have at least to count towards something, and you may just need to do a bridge qualification or something like that, but I don't know. But it's an interesting topic. And if anybody does know, come and tell us. We'd love to hear. If you have qualified in a different country and are maybe practicing here in the UK, we want to hear from you and get that chat going on our Facebook group.
Absolutely. So if you are out there and you've had that experience of taking your qualifications that you've got in the UK, going to another country and bridging or getting work out there or practicing in another country, you can either tell us on our Facebook page or drop us a line at Rory at counsellingtutor.com or Ken at counsellingtutor.com. We'd love to hear you, and maybe we'll come back to this if we get any response. Maybe we'll visit it and just share what people have said.
Definitely, and it goes deeper still, because what else can you do with your counselling qualification? Because we train counsellor, psychotherapist to presumably go into practice, but it's not that way for all people. I know many people, I know peers from my course that didn't intend going into practice. They intended using their qualifications in other areas. What's your thoughts on that, Rory?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that a counselling qualification, whether you do the certificate, which is a level 3, or you do a practice-based qualification, which is level 4, it gives you so many strands to your employability. You know, you've got the interpersonal skills, the soft skills, and, you know, really, really useful. You've also got a good handle on ethics, standards and ethics. You've got a handle on your own processes, but more, you know, in terms of personal development, but more to the point, you've been adapted to learn. It shows the employer that you can learn this. It proves a commitment to study. And, you know, a lot of employers, certainly in social care, in my experience, take counselling qualifications very seriously, because a lot of them either have taken them themselves and know that it's not just a paper-based exercise that you sit down, write a few lines, hand the odd essay in and pass at the end of the year. You put your heart and soul into it. And I think that goes down a long way as the employer. I would certainly, if I was employing someone, think very, very long and hard about a candidate who came to me with a counselling qualification, because I know how tough it is. I know that, you know, the kind of resilience and mental toughness and just pure stickability it takes to complete a counselling course.
Definitely.
It's a bit like being in the kind of academic SAS.
I think anyone listening to this that's going through a counselling course at the moment is nodding in agreement and going, yes. And there is, because you're looking at yourself, you've got that personal development, you've got the assignments and all the pressures that may come from that. And I agree with you. I think it's, you once said a lovely word or a phrase, Rory. You said, it's CV gold, that is. CV gold. It's cream. It rises right to the top. And the skills are adaptable. They are usable in different areas. And I recognize that from my own training, that it's even usable just in my day-to-day life. You know, if somebody had lost someone that had a bereavement in the family, when they told me about it, or I found out about it, or I saw them, I would feel uncomfortable. I wouldn't know what to say. And I'm very grateful for my training that I'm okay with that now. And there's things like teaching, where being able to listen and be there with learners is just so important. Nursing. So it really is transferable into so many areas. So, yeah. And if you are listening to this and maybe you did a counselling course and you don't intend going into practice, again, share on the Facebook page. What can you do with your qualification? We want to hear. I certainly want to learn. And I learn best when I listen to you guys.
Absolutely, Ken. And let's not just forget and put a plug in for our good friends in the recovery world, who help so many people recover from drugs, alcohol, bereavement, all those things that can really kind of impact and damage people's lives. You know, I've trained more than I can count people who've left and gone into recovery work, and as we speak, Ken, making a huge difference in people's lives and society in general. So, yeah, a bit of a shout out for the guy. You know who you are. If you're listening to this and you've trained with us, you know who you are. But, fantastic, fantastic work. And, sometimes a bit undercredited, I think.
Yeah, key workers, support workers out there doing great work. Yep. And again, even a certificate in counselling, having those listening skills, so valuable in that line of work. We could go on and on, Rory. We could go on and on. But we've got to get on to Theory with Rory, and it's the truthful theory with Rory, because we're looking at congruence. Yes,
congruence. It's a great word, isn't it? And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the theory of congruence, which is, of course, one that Carl Rogers talks about. I have to say he's not the only theorist. There's quite a few theorists who talk about being genuine in the therapeutic relationship. But I'm also going to share some anecdotes from my practice about being congruent and being real, and more to the point, what happens in the therapeutic alliance when you are the person you are. You're not a facade or like a hiding behind a professional mask when you're real. And I'm going to share the story of my rumbling tummy, so stay tuned.
Let's go into Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
Hello and welcome to Theory with Rory, and Theory with Rory with a different approach. Usually when I do these theory sections, I write a script, and then what I do from that script is I read from it. And there's a good reason for that. I think it sounds more professional, it flows better, and also I don't have to rely on my memory to bring in topics or develop arguments. But I thought today, in this section, that instead of using a script, I would just write a few notes and just talk as if I was sitting with you. And the reason for that is that I'm covering congruence, genuineness. And it's a theory that Rogers came up with in his 1957 paper in the Consulting Journal of Psychology, which he called the necessary and sufficient conditions for therapeutic change. Now, Rogers listed 6 conditions, and I guess everybody knows empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. And if you're a person-centered therapist, you should know the other 3. But I'm going to concentrate on just congruence, being genuine. Rogers put a heck of a lot of stock in the genuineness of the therapist as a instigator of therapeutic change. And I believe one of the reasons was that in the 1940s, psychoanalysis was the dominant therapy that was practiced. In fact, Rogers himself trained in psychoanalysis. And at that time, which is very different to present day psychoanalysis, I'll have to put that in, at that time, the therapist was actually told, and it was promoted, that they didn't have any kind of relational contact with their clients, who they called the analysand. That's what they used to call them, the analysand. And that the therapist's job was to try to stop any transference, any connection of emotions, and work only with the analysis of where the client was at, and to analyse and to reflect back wise and learned observation. So when Rogers came along in the 50s and developed this idea of the therapist being real and genuine, he really did cause a bit of a stir, because this was not the norm really in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. And in fact, he wrote, genuineness in therapy means that the therapist is his actual self. During his encounter with the client, without facade, he openly has the feelings and attitudes that are flowing in him at the moment. And the reason you might hear a bit of humour in my voice is that I was working with a client when my tummy made a huge rumble. And when I'm talking about a huge rumble, I'm not talking of a little one. I'm talking of an earthquake-sized rumble that the client heard. I heard, and in my fantasy mind, the people in the next room could hear. It was really loud. And the client stopped, looked at me, and said, kind of earnestly, "Have you had any breakfast this morning?" Now, I had a choice. I could have hidden behind a professional facade and said something like, "Well, actually, it's not really about what I've had to eat. It's about, what you're bringing." But instead, I just said, "Yeah, I've had 2 Oatibix," and I think that's what you could hear. And she looked at me, and then she burst out laughing. And at that moment, our relationship altered. It altered for the course of the therapy. She saw me as someone who's real, inside and out, and inside being a good example with the Weetabix and the digestive tract. But she saw me as a real person. I believe that. And I've had occasions where I've, may have made a mistake in therapy or missed somebody. I can think of another example a few years ago where I was doing a summary, and when I got to the end, I thought, that is not a great summary. And I said to the client, "I want to apologise for that summary because I just don't think it was very good." And the client just looked at me and said, "No, it wasn't." And it was like, "Oh, okay." So I apologised, and it was all, taken in good spirit. And the client came in the next week and she said to me, "How's your summarising?" And I said, "Well, I think it's going to be better this week." And what struck me was in those 2 examples, and there's many more I could cite through my career, when I do that and I'm real in the relationship, then the client becomes real as well. They see me as a real person, inside and out. And it's just so important. And it is a bit risky because, sometimes we taught in our counselling courses that, it's about the clients and not to divulge too much of ourselves. But in those 2 cases, I thought that actually, it wasn't going to harm the relationship just to be honest in that moment of time. And congruence is something that really marks out a good therapeutic alliance where the client feels they can trust you. And I think there's some really good reasons for this. I think the first is that a lot of clients come with very, very strong views that other people have put on them. And part of that is about not being themselves, not being real, being other people. And, if we're looking at person-centered therapy, that is introjected values and conditions of worth. If we're looking at our friends in the world of TA, then that's injunctions. In other words, it's kind of the same things. And if a client can see the therapist real and that they can make mistakes and that they can own their mistakes, then it's all right for them to do it. And part of that is about mirroring what someone who's okay is like. And I found through my career, that's been just so useful. I've always tried to be myself. Recently, I went on a lecturing trip to Derry in Ireland, and I met some wonderful students and some wonderful tutors and had a fantastic time. And after I delivered the lecture, I was invited for into the pub, which it was a room within a hotel, and there's a pub part of it. And I went in, and I had a coffee with them, and sat down. And one of the students said to me, "Well, who's the real Rory?" And I said, "Well, pretty much what you see, to be honest." I said, I ain't much different than you see me. That's all I am. And it was quite kind of interesting because they developed, I think, an idea, maybe see me on social media or hear me on the podcast. But actually, once I just said, "Well, I'm just me," it was kind of it took a different direction. Now, maybe that's my perception. And we had a fabulous time. We had a few coffees and we went our separate ways, but it was a great time. And it struck me about being genuine is really important, but it's sometimes really, really difficult. And before I move on to my 5 steps of being genuine, I'd like to give another quote from Rogers because he had a lot to say on it. And he said, "It means avoiding the temptation to present a facade or hide behind a mask of professionalism, or to assume a confessional professional attitude. It is not simple to achieve such reality. Being real involves the difficult task of being acquainted with the flow of experience going within oneself, a flow marked especially by the complexity and continuous change." And what Rogers was alluding to was personal growth and personal reflection. Being yourself is an easy thing to say, but it does take a lot of personal development in various degrees. Some people, are okay from the offset. Others may develop that sense of who they are through therapy or through training. So I find that it's a different process for everybody. And I'm going to share with you my 5 observations that I've taken through the years of being genuine. And they may not be for everyone, but they certainly work for me. So the first is be yourself. There's a great Oasis song called Supersonic, and it starts off by saying, "You've got to be yourself. You can't be no one else." And it's the truest words that I've ever heard in a song. It's so true. You cannot be somebody else. You've got to be yourself. And I kind of live by that. I'm just who I am, and that's it, really. People can take me or leave me. A bit like Marmite, really. Don't hide behind a professional facade. I think it's kind of easy, especially if we're under pressure, maybe in the therapy room, that we can become defensive and hide behind that professional mask. Like with my tummy rumble, it would have been easy for me to fall back into the professional and literally unbalance the power and say to the client, "Well, we're not here really to talk about my stomach rumbling. We're here to talk about your problems," and put on fake genuineness and look like some kind of sage. So yeah, don't hide behind a professional facade. You're a professional person as a therapist, but also you can be yourself as well. My third top tip, if it's a top tip at all, is if you're wrong, own it. I found that by admitting that I might have got something wrong, that actually the client can see that it's okay to get things wrong. Now, clearly there are some things that, aren't okay to get wrong. If you're an airline pilot, then, landing the plane upside down isn't something that is kind of easily correctable. But genuinely, if you make a mistake, then, just say, "I think I made a mistake. I'm sorry." And be real about it. And, the ethical framework actually talks about apologising. If you look in the ethical framework, it says sometimes the way to not get into a difficult situation is by saying, "Look, I'm sorry, I made a mistake." The fourth one is if you don't know something, admit it. Now, through the years, clients can attribute to you knowledge you don't have. And through the years, I've been asked about all sorts of things. And if I don't know, I say I don't know. Simple as that. Because to try and pretend that I knew would not be real. It would not be genuine. And also, if you tell somebody something that you don't know, that you made up, you'll almost certainly come unstuck.
And the final one, I think, is the most trickiest thing for a therapist. And I know we have a lot of student therapists listening to this. And it can be very tricky. And the fifth one is let the client see the real you. And I think that I will tell you a story about a student that I had who talked to me many years ago about his first encounter with counselling training. And he wasn't taught by me, he was taught by a colleague of mine who was brilliant teacher. And she came in and she was kind of running behind, and she couldn't switch the computer on, and she couldn't do this and she couldn't do that, and she couldn't find a pen drive, and she said, I'm really sorry, I'm running behind time. And I remember him saying, I thought counsellors were people who were just ethereal. They were just people who were like godly. And to see this very capable tutor, capable therapist, going round not knowing how to plug the computer in and not knowing how to put the pen drive in and forgetting the password for the computer was a bit of a revelation, because it realised that the person who was teaching him was a real human being. And if it was all right for that person to be flawed, then it was all right for him to be human and be flawed. And it was one of the most powerful things that he ever learnt as a therapist. And he would tell me time and time again when we met, it was most powerful, one of the most powerful lessons he ever had before he even got into the lessons. So that's the end of this little ramble through genuineness and congruence. I'd be interested in how you experience me talking without a script, being genuine, taking a risk that I might fluff my lines or say a word wrong, or it might not be flowing. So if you just indulge me, I'd be grateful if you go onto our Facebook page, which is Counselling Tutor. If you're a member of Counselling Tutor, you'll know where that is. If you're new to the podcast, if you go into Facebook, type Counselling Tutor, 2 L's in counselling, we spell it the English UK way. And when I put this podcast episode up, when it's published, I'd be really interested in how you experienced me without a script, just really rambling on and just talking as if I was talking to you. Was it different? I wonder. But it is about being genuine inside and out.
Thank you as always, Rory. Great story. I love the story of the rumbling tongue. I had to smile as I was listening to that. But you know what you did? You actually acknowledged it. You didn't hide it away, pretend it wasn't there. And that's what congruence is about. And it was really interesting what that did within the relationship, how being real really does. It takes it to another level.
Absolutely, Ken. And I have to say, for anybody who's met me, there really is no hiding my tummy.
There's a great handout to go with that. So you can get that right now by going to our mother website, which is counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, go to episode number 36. It's right there at the top of the page. And if you've got any of Rory's handouts, then you're going to know how valuable they are, especially when you cover these topics in your assignments. You're going to want to have them in file on hand. Really, really useful stuff there. So thank you very much for that, Rory. And I guess coming on to an interesting topic, and that's the topic of funding. So we're on a counselling course. How are these courses funding? Is funding available? How does it work?
Well, yes, it's something that's come up in our Facebook page of people bandying around sums of money. Correctly, I think the figures I've seen are quite correct. It's not cheap to become a counsellor. Someone put the figure up of about 6,000 UK pounds, sterling, which is about 20 million euros with the way the pound is against. When one starts off on that journey, it's worth thinking about how you're going to fund it. And I was head of a counselling department for a decade, and about 5 years ago, quite helpfully, the government decided to do 24 plus loans after they unhelpfully took away funding for students. So, students would get free funding. So they took that away, and instead they were going to give you a loan. And you can get loans for your courses. If you 24 plus or you're 18 plus now. I think when I left at the end of last academic year, that was 2016, it's about 18 plus loans. And certainly for level 3 and level 4 courses, you can get funding, but be careful because every year we sit with bated breath, or I used to sit with bated breath, waiting for our colleagues in the funding department to send me an email at the college saying the funding agency has approved these courses for funding. And sometimes it was the last minute, so there were students saying, well, can I get 24 plus loan? And I'd be saying to them, the answer is I don't know because the funding agency hasn't yet told us. And right at the last minute, they say yes. So if you go into a college, almost certainly you'll get access to 24 plus loans because they're geared up for it. Private training providers, well, some do 24 plus loans and a lot don't, is my sense. So I think I'd ask. And the other thing with 24 plus loans is make sure you finish the course, because if you're paying for it in installments and you decide not to bother, then depending on the contract you've got with your training provider, they can chase you up for the money or not. However, if it's a 24 plus loan with a college, they'll almost certainly put it out for collection.
So just a question from my side then. So 24 plus loan, I gather that you need to be older than 24 years old to qualify for that.
Yeah. 18 okay. The book now, yeah.
Okay, and so that is a loan, so that you pay back. And is there interest on that loan, or is it an interest?
There is interest, and I would ask people to look into it before they jump. And I'm certainly not getting, just to be clear and absolutely transparent, we're not getting any kickback from the loans company here. Nope. We're just sending the information. Yeah. But have a look at it. And the other thing is, and colleges really, really don't like this being known, is if you've got a bit of difficulty in your life, you can ask for a learning break. So if you're, say, going through a diploma course and you have a bereavement, and the tutor says, it may be best if you take some time out, maybe start with us again next year. What you should do is get a learning break. And your college should, they don't have to, I have to say, but they should give you a learning break, which means they can freeze it for so long and you can start again. Where it does bring difficulties is I've had students who've started at one college, maybe they moved down south or up north, and thought, well, I'll transfer the loan, because technically they are transferable. But counselling courses are kind of different, and you can't really join a second year diploma course because the group's formed. So if you're doing counselling courses in the UK, 18 plus loans, 24 plus loans, depending on if the government fund your particular program of study. So you're going to have to liaise with your college. For those who are in independent training, and Ken and myself were having a bit of a chat. Ken was telling me about someone who was looking to get a TA course. And TA courses are quite expensive because they're a lot more hours and they're over a longer duration, 5 years. Yeah. 600 hours, I think, when I was talking to someone at the UKCP recently, 600 hours. So that could be difficult. I mean, most training providers will let you pay monthly, I think. You'd have to ask them. But that's not all the costs. The costs, things like supervision, insurance, professional membership, bus fares, and then there's the hidden costs of having to take maybe a day off work to go somewhere, because you might have to attend a practice meeting at your practice, and you might have to use a day's holiday. So I'd get a calculator and a pen and a pencil out and start working it out.
It's a consideration, isn't it? It can mount up. You have your own private therapy that you may be required to engage in, which is out of your own pocket. If you have a residential where your group goes away, that can be an additional cost on top of. It's quite a consideration.
It is, and the prices are going up. There's no one reducing prices in the world of education at the moment. The prices are going up. But having said that, when you qualify with level 3 or level 4, you've got solid gold qualifications. The qualifications, as we talked earlier, that employers look at.
Yeah.
And it leads you into a wider field just than maybe counselling. You can do lots of other things.
Great circle right back to where we started today. Episode 36 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, speaking about what we can do with those qualifications when we graduate, how they can be transferable to other skills, other professions, other things we may choose to do. Can we take them overseas? Well, we'll look on the Facebook page to see what people say about that one. Great theory with Rory, looking at that congruence, that real self, that transparency. And of course, what we've just been speaking about now, Rory, funding, which took us neatly back to the beginning. Great episode.
Yeah, so as always, at the end of the podcast, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.